Hi, I wanted to make this video because I've been thinking. And this time I've been thinking about overthinking the details. And the reason I've been thinking about overthinking the details is because I think it might be a subject that causes me a few problems in life. So I wanted to share some of my thoughts about it with other people to find out whether anyone else can relate to what I'm saying. And I'd also like to find some ways to stop overthinking from holding me back in life, especially when it comes to planning for my future and for my retirement. So I'm a bit worried that this subject might make me sound a bit judgmental, but I don't mean it that way, or at least I don't think I do. I'm just genuinely curious about whether other people have the same sort of concerns that I do when it comes to knowing all the details. So, what do I even mean? Well, I think I mean that when I start learning about a subject, I usually find that instead of starting to feel more knowledgeable about the subject, it seems to have the opposite effect, and that instead I start to realise how much there is to know and therefore how little I actually know. So even though I'm learning, I end up feeling less of an expert than I was to start with, and if that makes any sense. So I think the big question I have towards other people is, how do you know when you have enough information to form an opinion or to start feeling like an expert on a subject, or to be able to make an important decision about your life? So this is where it might start to sound a bit judgmental, because I've been wondering, do some people not care that they haven't found out all the details? Or maybe they don't realise that they haven't found out all the details? Or maybe they just feel confident that they have enough information to be able to start forming opinions or making decisions. So I genuinely don't know what the answer is to those questions. I just know that I always feel that there's more to know, so I'd better hold off on forming an opinion or making a decision until I find out the rest. The problem is that that's an impossible goal, because no one ever knows everything. So if you want to make progress in life, at some point, you just have to take a leap. But when should I leap? How much is enough? So, an example of when this type of thinking has caused me problems or held me back is deciding where to live. So it seems like such a massive question, and every different possibility needs so much research. So it just completely overwhelms me. And I find it hard to understand how anyone manages to make a decision about that. I find it much easier to have that sort of thing decided for me, but life doesn't really work like that. And when we moved into this house, my husband really had to make all the decisions and do all the work, because I just couldn't decide whether or not I wanted to live here. I mean, I'm still not sure, and it's been 12 years now. And it must have been quite annoying for him, because he wanted a decision from me, but I really struggled to give one. And how could I know if I would be happy here? How could I know that there wasn't a better option somewhere else? How could I know if we'd regret it or decide it was a mistake? And I think in the end I just told him to do whatever he thought was right, which really wasn't very helpful. And I would quite like to move again in the future, but I've got no idea how to choose where we should go and what type of house we should go for. And I don't want to give up on it, and so I'd love to know how other people tackle a decision like that, because I'd like to be a bit more help next time if I can. And I have a similar problem with changing jobs. I want to know everything about the new job before I can make a decision about whether or not I want it. But that information is never available. And even if it was, I think you'd be unlikely to get the full truth of what's likely to be the good and bad bits of any job. And it might not feel the same for you as for the previous person anyway. So that feels like another thing that I'd prefer someone else to decide for me and just tell me what I need to do. If I had to decide for myself, I know I'd be worried about leaving and then regretting it and wanting my old job back, but not being able to get it. I think maybe my job would have to be taken away from me in order for me to leave, unless I really hated it, which I don't. So maybe that makes me sound like I'm lacking in courage, but I don't think that's the main problem, because I can be quite courageous when I need to be. But this feels more like never getting to the end of the unanswerable questions, rather than not having the courage to go for something different. So is it a good thing or a bad thing to have this need for so much information? It feels like a bad thing based on all the things that I've just talked about. But I enjoy information, so it can't all be bad, can it? Maybe it's just that I haven't got the balance right yet. So I read something the other day that said something like, overthinkers never make any progress. And it's something that's been going around in my mind. I guess you could say that I've been overthinking it. But the reason it's been going around in my mind is because I have a horrible feeling that it could be right, but I don't want that to apply to me. So I want to be able to find a better balance. And I know it's possible because I see other people around me forming opinions about things and making decisions and changing jobs and moving house. So what is it that they're doing differently from me? So I think the bottom line is that they're thinking, but they're not overthinking. So if that is the case, then how does an overthinker stop overthinking? So I've spent a bit of time looking into this and thinking about it, and I'm pleased to say that there are some useful techniques that can be used. So I'll tell you about the ones that I've been finding the most useful. So the first one is to keep calm. And it's much harder to think straight if the pressure is starting to build and then the thoughts all start to get jumbled. So if that starts to happen, then I need to step away and come back to it again later when I can be calm and think clearly. And the next one is to make sure I'm not spending time thinking about things that I can't control. Those what if type of questions that often just get in the way and don't really have any value. And they definitely fuel the fire of overthinking, so maybe need to be avoided. And then the next one is to set a reasonable time limit for gathering the information and thinking about it. So bigger decisions are going to need a bit more time, but they don't need forever. And smaller decisions might only need 10 minutes. So set in a reasonable amount of time and then sticking to it. And I sometimes also find that it's helpful to get the thoughts out of my head and down onto paper or digital. And I quite like having a list of pros and cons for decisions because it helps me to stop things whirring around in my mind. I can also have a column for things that aren't within my control so that I can acknowledge them and get them out of my head, but not get sidetracked by them. And then I think the last technique is just to be kind to myself and remember that nothing in life has to be perfect. And in fact, some of the most memorable things happen when something goes a bit wrong. So I shouldn't be too afraid of making a mistake because it might turn out to be a good thing in the end. So I've been trying out some of those techniques and I like them. I haven't needed them for anything big yet, so I'll be interested to find out whether they can help when I'm faced with something a bit more challenging. So I'd be interested to know what other people think about this and whether it's a struggle for you too, or if you have any tips for how to be okay with all the things that you don't know so that you can still form an opinion or make a decision about things and keep making progress in your life. So I'm really keen to make sure that overthinking doesn't get in the way of planning for my retirement. And I came across something recently that implied that people who overthink can sometimes delay retirement because they can't make a decision about when is the right time to go. And it kind of hit a nerve with me because I can imagine that happening to me. So I know I need to get practicing with this so that I won't get stuck with overthinking and letting that get in the way of making the big decision about when to actually start my retirement. And I knew I already wanted to work on this subject, but reading that comment about retirement really gave me a push to take it a bit more seriously and to start work on overcoming it. So my retirement planning is really all about trying to remove any of the potential barriers that might get in the way of me achieving the fantastic retirement that I'm hoping for. So I'm adding this one to my list. So, getting back to the original question, can I do anything to stop my overthinking and my need for all the details from holding me back in life? Well, hopefully, yes. I seem to have found some techniques that will allow me to indulge my need for information, but within some healthier limits when it's something that I need to make progress with. I'm still planning to have some subjects that I don't have any limits on, but those will be things that I'm just interested in rather than things I need to make a decision about or need to move forward in my life. And hopefully that approach is going to work well for me, but I'll let you know how I get on. So I hope you've taken something useful from this video, but I think that's all for this time. So thanks for watching and I hope to see you next time. Bye.